Hello. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another one of the Grim Reaper's Nightmare radio stations, represented by yours truly, Grim Reaper's Nightmare. Now, I will be straight up here. I am not going to be jumping in between each of my stories and giving you a little rundown as to what's going on. I'm just at the start here to let you know that it's been a long time. I've missed all of you, and I hope you enjoy what we are putting down. This isn't going to be too exciting, though. It's just old stories that some of you may have already heard, so you don't even have to really jump on and listen any further if you don't want to. But I would be happy to see you guys come along and leave comments throughout the way. Well, that is enough from my boy and us, and let's get on to the main event and start playing these amazing, scary stories.
Some books that were due. But when I drove up to the outdoor book return, the chute wouldn't open. I figured I must not have known how to open it, so I decided to go inside and return them. As I was walking towards the door, I noticed a man with earbuds sitting on a bench near the entrance. I thought nothing of it and kept walking, but when I got to the door, I found that it was locked. I was surprised because I didn't think the library would be closed yet. I knew they were supposed to be closed for Labor Day, but I didn't think it would be yesterday. There were cars parked outside too. I shrugged it off and walked back to my car, which was parked a few meters away. I didn't look behind me, but as I was walking back, I heard the man singing loudly to himself. It sounded more like he was yelling. He was saying, "Goa, Goa, Goa." I thought it was a little bit weird and wondered if he was directing it at me because I was leaving, but I just ignored it. I've never heard anyone sing to themselves in public like that, so it creeped me out a little, but not enough to raise red flags. As soon as I got back to the car, the man started waving at me to come over. I froze for a moment because I wondered what he needed. I was the only one in the parking lot, so I was sure he wasn't beckoning to anyone else. But then I remembered a warning my father had given me not to come over when a stranger beckons me. He specifically told me that because of this one encounter I had at a park that was similar. That's another story. Either way, I found it odd, so I locked my doors and drove away. He kept staring at my car as I left. I felt guilty because I didn't want to seem rude or stuck up, but I didn't know what his intentions were. I gave it some thought later and figured he might have just wanted to tell me that the library was closed, but if he had wanted to tell me, he could have told me when I was at the door. There was no reason for him to beckon me over after I had just gotten into my car. I honestly don't know what to make of it. I think I may have overreacted a little. I suppose I could have driven up to the curb and lowered my window, but I didn't like the idea of that either. It could have been completely harmless and I misjudged, but I can't tell for sure. I didn't mean to be rude, I just drove away because the situation creeped me out. Final edit. The title is a little misleading. A fairer way to say would be, please don't beckon at strangers.
I hate everything about Halloween. I don't want to see the decorations that come into local shops far too early. I don't want to see ghouls and ghosts. I don't even want to see pumpkins. I stay at home, turn off the lights so no trick-or-treaters come by. I wait for the holiday to end anxiously. I wasn't always like this, and I hate thinking about the catalyst that started it all. I was in 7th grade, and my brother was in the 9th grade. Ricky was so much nicer, kinder, and more handsome than I. I despised so many things about him. So every chance I got, I made fun of him. My friends did too. It never really bothered him until one October when we were watching, so I tried not to bring it up again. It was a bloody scene, after all, and not everyone is into that type of movie. Come Halloween, he tried to prove that he wasn't scared of anything. We all dressed up as superheroes, and he dressed as the Grim Reaper. I told my friends before we met up with Ricky and Sarah not to bring up the scary movie. Don't bring it up. Just leave him alone, I told them sternly. What if he screams like a little girl? Can we bring it up then? Danny laughed. I punched him in the arm. Ow! I was just kidding, he responded. I'm serious. Leave him alone tonight. I picked up my Captain America shield, and we headed down the street. Ricky was pretty quiet, and him and Sarah held hands the whole night. They didn't really trick-or-treat, but they watched us. Danny's little sister was there with us too. She was only in 4th grade. As we finished trick-or-treating in our neighborhood, Danny asked if we could go a little further into town. There were some more dangerous parts of town my parent didn't let us go to, but Ricky wanted to prove he wasn't scared of anything, and agreed to take us all. I told him we didn't have to go, and it's okay, but he insisted. Everything was fine for the first few houses, but then we knocked on one door, where we heard a couple fighting. We should go. I tugged Ricky's sleeve. No, it's probably an act for Halloween. Ricky knocked again. I have a bad feeling about this, Sarah said. Just then, the door opened and a body dropped in front of us. It was a man covered in blood. We all stepped back and off the porch, but Ricky stayed put. Danny's little sister began crying and Sarah held her. It's just an act, guys. Ricky laughed and knelt beside the body. He even dipped his finger in the blood and even tasted it. That's when his face changed. The guy, covered in blood, reached for Ricky and grabbed his collar. Help me, he begged, and Ricky struggled to get the man off his shirt. As Ricky realized it wasn't an act, a tall woman in all black with blood on her face came up behind him with a knife. She tried to stab Ricky, but he walked back and fell down the stairs. The knife grazed his face, and we all began running. When we got home, we had to tell my parents what happened, and the police got involved. After the police wrote the report and left, I went to Ricky's room to see if he was okay. He wasn't responding to my knocks, so I opened the door slowly. He was sitting on his bed and staring at his hands that still had some blood on them. I tasted his blood. I thought it was candy. His eyes filled with tears. I laughed at a dying man. You didn't know. It's okay. I put my arm around him. I tasted his blood. He began, getting loud, and my parents rushed into the room and held him. They told me to leave as they tried to calm him down. It's been over 20 years, but Ricky still has that scar and has never been the same since that day. He isn't the kind, happy-go-lucky person he used to be. He's afraid of everything and everyone. It makes me feel terrible that I am now married with 2 children, and Ricky won't let people come into his apartment. He does, however, dress up on Halloween and walks around on the same street that he got the scar on. People have reported him to the police, but he always tells them the same thing. I don't want what happened to me to happen to anyone else. I joined a forum online to learn about lucid dreaming and how to control your dreams. It was during quarantine and I had nothing better to do. I always asked a question about things I was doing, like falling mid-flight or creating monsters and waking up out of fear. Then I got a private message by a user called Dear to Dream 42. She told me how I could be paired with a partner called a Master Dreamer, someone more skilled than myself and become an expert lucid dreamer. Seeing as she didn't ask for money, I felt I had nothing to lose. You could meet up in dreams with a Master Dreamer to show you how limitless the possibilities are, she wrote. I thought to myself how this isn't possible, but let's see what happens. I mean, what endless possibilities for people to meet up with others in their dreams. The problem was you have to find someone you're dream capable with. The rules were simple. You can only speak in wake hours about lucid dreaming. No small talk, no getting to know one another. No sharing photos, and definitely no becoming friends. After your dream master helps you lucid dream on your own, you would no longer work or speak with him. Within a week, I was paired with a master dreamer. Cora was perfect, kind and understanding. She saw potential in me. I told her what things I absolutely didn't want to see in my dreams and all the reasons behind not wanting to see them. I mean, not wanting to see blood or murder didn't need an explanation, but I told her about my fear of spiders because of a traumatic experience as a child. I told her my fear of drowning and other things that I hadn't shared with others. I asked her what things she did not want to see, and she told me not to worry about her, that somehow simultaneously calmed and intimidated me. I was nervous, but also I felt like she knew what she was doing. The first few days were hard because we'd be in the same dream, but we had to find one another. After we created methods and signs to find one another, we quickly began the process. She was beautiful, adventurous and kind. I felt like I had a big sister showing me the ropes. It was like learning to ride a bike. While learning to fly in my dreams, I had moments I'd slowly be falling and she'd grab my hand each time. Don't overthink it, Adam. She must have said it to me 20 times in the first 2 weeks. It worked though. I stopped overthinking. Once I mastered flying, she taught me to conjure up different items. It started with food, which was my favorite. The first time I thought up an apple, it was half green, half red. She laughed at me. I know, I am overthinking it. I tried again, and it was a perfectly red apple. It even tasted like an apple, but super sweet. Then she wanted to place a random vehicle around my dreams, and I had to get them started up. In most dreams, you don't have to have car keys, but the problem I always came across was the car changing. So, first I'm in a big Hummer with, in a few moments, it's a tiny car without any walls. She taught me to keep the car constant. The next lesson was about animals and insects. I created a beautiful butterfly whose wingspan was bigger than mine. I was so proud, and it was so beautiful. And not a moment later, Cora made a spider the same size as my butterfly, and the spider devoured my butterfly. I freaked out. I woke up immediately. I told myself she didn't do it on purpose, and it must have been an accident. I emailed her about the incident, and her response was, "It must have slipped my mind." There was no apology, but I believed her. The next few days went by pleasantly. We worked together in our dreams, and we even made an island. As I was flying above it, I saw Cora make a boat. I didn't know why she was doing that, so I went to ask. "Cora, are you going to sea?" I asked nicely. She turned around, gave me a blank stare, and then smiled. Within moments, I was on a boat in the middle of the water and freaking out. I tried to fly off the boat, but I was overthinking it and too anxious. I kept panicking, and the boat slowly began filling up with water, causing it to sink. I shouted for Cora, and she was nowhere to be found. I began cupping the water with my hands and throwing it out of the boat, but it was hardly doing anything. Did Cora do this on purpose? What was going on with her? Why was she changing out of nowhere? I looked behind me, and Cora was there, floating above the water, smiling. "Adam, you have to face your fears." She then disappeared. It was that moment that I feared more than the water. I tried to wake myself up, but I couldn't concentrate. Now the boat was mostly submerged underwater, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I sunk with the boat, and my heart began racing. As it was a dream, I could breathe underwater, and I thought to myself, this isn't too bad. I'll be okay. That's when I turned around and saw a whale shark. It opened its mouth and came right towards me. I closed my eyes tight, and when I opened them, I was awake. To this day, it makes no sense to me, but I had a gash on my left shoulder blade. It was as if the shark really did bite me. The wound was bad enough to be concerned with, but not bad enough for an ER visit. I wrote to Cora that I never want to see her again and that she cannot join me in my dreams. I was now incredibly fearful of my well-being, knowing that I could physically be injured in real life. I figured she'd back off and leave me alone, but she responded, "Someone's being dramatic." The next 3 nights I was afraid to go to sleep. I barely slept, and when I did, my entire dream consisted of me being on lookout. I was fed up and wrote in the dream forum about what happened to me. When I logged in, Later that day, I realized that my account had been deleted without any reason. I didn't know what was going on anymore. I was livid, and I was hurt, and mostly I was exhausted. I was tired of letting some stranger make me feel bad. That night, I went to sleep early and was ready to see Cora in my dreams. I called out to her and was ready to fight. I went from my bedroom to a dark, empty hallway. I heard her voice calling my name, but the echo came from many directions. Then the voice came directly behind me, and I turned around quickly. It was Cora, but she was a big spider. My anger made me overcome my fear. "I'm not scared of you." I grabbed a knife that I was holding and stabbed her directly in the stomach. She pulled it out and laughed. Then she grabbed me by the throat and lifted me off the ground, and then dropped me. She then disappeared. I began choking and coughing really hard. The hallway was slowly filling up with water. It now covered my hands. I was still coughing, and then I felt something come up my throat. It was a spider. I began choking up spiders. I kept coughing up spiders, and the hallway was filling up with water. I tried not to panic, but it was my two worst fears, and they were both happening worse than I could have ever imagined. I woke up covered in sweat and crying. That was 2 years ago, and I'm happily married with a baby on the way. I don't think about what happened often, but I'm writing this all to you now as it's 4 a.m. and I woke up abruptly. I went downstairs to get some water, and my wife had fallen asleep on the couch with her laptop on her chest. This normally happens when she has a big project coming up. I took her glasses off her face, folded them, and placed them on the coffee table. I then kissed her forehead. Then I picked up her laptop and wanted to make sure that what she was working on was saved before I closed it. That's when I saw it. She had logged in on a sleep forum, one that I used before I had even met her. Her username was Dare to Dream 42. My heart sunk, and I told myself that this can't be real. I wish I had found out that she was cheating, because this is so much worse. I looked at her, and she was still fast asleep. Maybe I remembered Cora's username incorrectly. I looked at her past messages, and she had messaged multiple people about helping them with their lucid dreaming attempts. In some, she introduced herself as Corey, some as Cora. It was her. I'm married to my worst nightmare, and I have no idea what to do, or even how to bring this up to her, or even if I should. Let me tell you a story about a European lady named Emma who went to Afghanistan in the 70s. The group she was with travelled by van to different regions. On their way to Buck, they made a stop in a small country area to get gas and some more food. Emma, who was very curious and intrigued, wandered off by herself. As she was taking photos of the trees, she found herself beside a lake and saw a young boy sit beneath a large apple tree. In her broken diary, she asked if she could have an apple. No, not from this tree. He didn't even look up at her, but was fixated on a small piece of wood in his hand. Any other tree is fine, but not this one. Well, why can't I have one from this tree? Emma was persistent. You can have one from any other tree. This one is important to me. Now he looked up at her. Trust me, you do not want one from this tree. She looked around at the other trees, but this tree had apples redder, fresher, and they even appeared juicier. She couldn't explain it, but she just had to have one from this tree. He warned her a third time that she couldn't have an apple from that specific tree. Then a woman's voice called out to him, and he ran home. Emma was excited. She didn't heed his warning. He probably just wants all these delicious ones to himself, she said as she began to reach for one. She grabbed an apple, washed it off in the lake, and took a bite. She closed her eyes and breathed in deeply. She had never tasted an apple so sweet. She grabbed a few more for the road and headed back to the van. Her friend, Margin, asked her where she had been, and she pointed at the tree. I made a friend. Margin didn't ask any questions, but looked over to where Emma pointed. The following day they had reached their destination in the north, and Emma had a throbbing headache. While everyone else was out shopping and sightseeing, she had to stay in bed. She was covered in sweat and had vivid nightmares all day long. It was the little boy from the tree, but he was half human, half animal. When she woke up and went to wash her face, she found leaves in her hair. She asked the Afghan woman in the house they were staying in if they had left the window open because she found leaves in her hair. Even if we left any windows open, there's no trees besides our home. It wasn't the response Emma wanted to hear, but she couldn't think straight either. Not with her serious headache. After 3 days in this condition, Emma knew she had to go back to the apple tree. She even had one apple left. I'll return this apple and everything will go back to normal, she tried to convince herself and calm down. On the way to Kabul, Emma asked if they could stop at the same country area, and the driver told her that would be fine. When they arrived, she still felt the intense headache, but she felt she may know how to heal it. She stepped out of the car and ran towards the tree. Immediately upon arriving, she did not see the boy anywhere. Bakar Jan, she called out for him. Bakar Jan, I have the apple. I'm sorry. I'm placing it back on this tree. She put the apple at the bottom of the trunk beside the roots. The apple shriveled within seconds and turned black. Emma gasped. Her headache got worse and she felt the water in the lake may help her. She stepped into the lake and immediately felt better. She began swimming and her headache left immediately. She began laughing and singing. The water felt so good on her skin. She never felt freer. After 30 minutes she tried to get out of the water, but she felt she got stuck on something. She looked up and the boy was there. He was crying. He covered his face with his hands. I tried to warn you, he cried. I told you. Why did you do it? What do you mean? What's happening to me? Emma began to panic. Then his mother called out again. He ran home, but now Emma realized his mother's voice wasn't coming from a distance, but rather the big tree with apples. She tried to get out of the water faster, but now her fingers had gotten hard, almost like a rough texture, and she had no grip. She felt something on her face. It was another leaf. She pulled the leaf from her hair, but this time it was painful to pull. It was attached to her scalp. She placed both hands on her head and tried to remove the leaves, but her head was full of them now. Margin, who saw her go towards the lake, went to check on her, but when she arrived, she screamed in horror. Emma was now sprouting apples and had leaves for hair. She ran and tried to help her out of the lake, but it was too late, as her feet had turned to roots and were intertwined with the other tree's roots. When she pulled on her arm, it felt as rough as tree bark. Some pieces of bark even came off her arms. Please don't leave me, Margin. I'm scared. Please don't leave me. I'll be right back, I promise. I'm coming right back. I'm not strong enough to get you out by myself. Margin pulled away from her and Emma cried harder. Please don't leave me. Please. Emma's voice began changing. She didn't sound like herself anymore. Her voice was becoming more hoarse. She couldn't speak anymore. It became entirely too difficult. Margin ran back to get help, but once the others arrived, Emma was nowhere to be found. There was only a lake and a few trees. One of them was new and attached to the larger tree. At the bottom of it was Emma's shawl. Margin cried. She kept saying sorry to Emma, but no one else believed what Margin saw. Nobody ever saw Emma again. A lot of people had theories, but none were confirmed. The only thing people knew for certain was they'd hear a woman crying while they swam in the lake. For the next few summers, Margin would visit the area and take some books to read besides the tree. She wasn't the only person that did this, and she saw some children, some men, and some women bring books, games, and even food to the trees surrounding the lake. Every once in a while, Margin felt a gentle breeze, and she closed her eyes to think of Emma.
I was jolted upright by the sound of my alarm. The clock read 6 a.m. I slammed my hand dramatically on the snooze button and let out a sigh for no one to hear. Same time every morning, but it never gets easier. I have been an insomniac ever since I was a child. plagued by vivid, detailed, reoccurring nightmares. It's as if I lived through entire days in some faraway land, only to wake up feeling drained and exhausted and ready for a good night's sleep. One I will never get. I drag myself out of bed and into the shower, getting ready for work in a dazed state, my body on autopilot. Looking in the mirror, I feel sick, seeing the lines on my face, the clear representation of how much time has passed since I've been stuck in this endless loop. The cycle of waking up, going to work, sitting behind a desk in a windowless room until the sun goes down, waiting impatiently for the day to end so I can go home, alone, to do nothing at all. Not daring to think too hard about anything, or to change my dismal routine, for fear that to break myself out of the trance of monotony would mean being forced to face the reality of how truly miserable my existence is. How empty. How lonely. Looking away in disgust, I feed my cat and leave for work. The day drags on. They all do. But this one in particular. It's getting harder to ignore the face in the mirror. The pathetic, sad face that was once dying to be free, that has now given in to the hopeless knowledge that this is how I will live and how I will die. Day in, day out. Day in, day out. Wake up, wait for the day to end. Restless sleep, repeat. Exhausted, apathetic, hollow. This is what real depression looks like, I think to myself. I had issues with anxiety and thoughts of suicide when I was young. I was angry, frustrated, hurt, scared. I felt overwhelmed by my emotions, trauma, deep suffering. I felt something. There was a fight in me. Even if that fight was directed towards the wrong people at all times. Even if the fear and anger destroyed any relationships I struggled to develop. I felt something. It was loud, like a constant screaming in my mind. Like a caged animal trying to claw its way to freedom. This fight, this rage, this fire within me is dead. The screaming has been replaced by a silence that is somehow louder. The dark racing thoughts replaced with an even darker void of thoughtlessness. The fire consumed by a cold emptiness. The defense mechanisms I created to tolerate the chaos inside of me may have worked too well. They have quelled the insanity and the rage, the fear and frustration, by hollowing myself out, by emptying my mind and draining my spirit. Replacing everything I feel with a numb nothingness. Alone in the void. Left to learn the hard way. That numb, quiet loneliness is worse than any pain this life can throw at you. I would kill myself if I had the energy or drive to bother. Instead, I sit on the couch and scroll through Netflix until I finally fall asleep. I am suddenly awoken, startled from another horrific nightmare. Whatever pieces are left of my soul, twisted and distorted through years of my forced repression, now monsters that haunt me anytime I seek a moment of rest. You really can't bury the past. You can try, but it will crawl its way out of the grave to hunt you down. A much greater enemy now than it was when you buried it. In a sudden moment of impulsivity, I grabbed the sharpest knife I own and began filling the bathtub. This is how it really happens, I think to myself. Less of the drawn-out, planned scenario they show you in movies. The reason why most surviving friends and families talk of a loved one's suicide being sudden and without warning. It is hard to fight the survival instinct, ingrained deep in the primal mind of all creatures. The more time you have to think about it, the harder it will be. The guilt will creep in. The fear will overtake the desire to end it. It's a moment of impulsivity, when the fire inside you, the need to be free, the soul that you drowned out through sorrow and a cold apathy towards life, finally wakes up screaming, urging you to make a move, to do something now, before you fall back into the half-asleep and half-alive state of being you've grown so unfortunately accustomed to. I hold the knife to my wrist, trying to gather the courage to make sure I succeed. The last thing I want is to wake up in a hospital, everyone crying and doting over me. All the worst imaginable kind of attention for someone who lives such a solitary life. Just fucking do it already! I scream at the face in the mirror.
Yeah, just do it.
Another voice suddenly chimes in. I let out a shriek as the knife drops to the floor. I pick it back up and turn around, holding it out into the air, an empty threat in an empty room. Who's there? I ask through a shaky, panicked voice. Who said that? Who fucking said that? Fear becoming frustrated anger as a weak attempt by my subconscious to force my body into fight mode.
Go on. Do it. Kill yourself, you miserable bitch. Look at yourself. You're pathetic. What do you have to live for? Just a waste of space on an overcrowded planet. One less sad fuck in the line at the grocery store. Do the world a favor, you sad little shit.
The voice that spoke was like none I had ever heard. Raspy and harsh, like someone who managed to live 300 years smoking a pack of Marlboros a day. The voice clears its throat and coughs a few times, and when it speaks again, the sound is that of a fairly high-pitched tone for a male voice with a very thick British accent.
So, sorry I'm late. Why don't you stop pointing that knife at me and turn it back around? Please, go on. Don't stop my account.
What the actual fuck? I say, my voice barely above a whisper. Who are you? How did you get in my apartment?
Well, I'm not in your apartment exactly. See, it's more like a space between worlds and a realm of total chaos, and I have owned in on your location by the beam of your external misery, so I can sort of fuck with you from the earthnetic plane. Yada yada. I honestly don't know exactly how it works above my pay grade.
Yeah, okay, right, and why are you fucking with me from the etheric plane or whatever the fuck?
It's my job.
Right, it's your job?
Yep, I'm a demon.
Huh. Interesting line of work.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. The hours are pretty chaotic, and my boss is a real cunt, but, you know, I get up every day, and I push on best I can. Could be worse, of course. Could be floating around all day in the Lake of Souls or Pit of the Damned. So, I try to keep a positive attitude.
Right.
Anyway, not to rush you here, but do you think maybe you could get on with it? I was just minding my business, having a nice nap, when next thing I knew, I was hurled through all the time and space to this location to help you along with the whole process of turning over your soul to the eternal damnation. And quite frankly, I'm tired.
Get on with it?
Yeah, get on with the whole killing yourself thing.
Well, I mean, I was going to, but you sort of interrupted that process, and now I'm slightly more interested in the fact that there's some disembodied voice in my kitchen calling himself a demon and speaking with a Cockney accent.
You don't get cheeky. I really need to meet my quota this month. I'm tired of being ridiculed day in, day out because Bill takes 3 teenage girls into a suicide pact and Clyde convinces an 8-year-old named Damon to kill his twin sister. Blah, blah, blah.
Gary whined.
Fucking overachievers. How hard is it to talk an 8-year-old into wanting all the attention? At least I'm willing to accept a challenge.
And with that, I burst into a fit of hysterical, uncontrollable laughter. Tears suddenly streaming down my face. Not even sure what I found so funny, but unable to stop even when I ran completely out of air.
Stop that! What's so funny?
The demon asked, clearly annoyed. This, all of this, it's just so ridiculous. Gotta hand it to that human survival instinct. I was so ready to end it this time. So ready. I guess my subconscious figured its last-ditch effort to keep me alive was to manufacture the hallucination of some demon who's total shit at his job, just to confuse me long enough to keep me from going through with it. Whew, my brain really is fascinating. I should have studied psychology.
Whoa, hey, kinda harsh. Maybe I'm not bad at my job. You're just shite at killing yourself.
This made me laugh even harder.
And screw you for suggesting your tiny little human brain would be able to manufacture something as complex and clever as myself.
More laughter.
I'm glad you're finding this all so amusing, but seriously, I have a quota to make, and if I lose another bit to Bill and Ted at the office, they'll never let me live it down. I'll be demoted to shit shoveler in no time. Just shoveling shit into the pit of souls day in, day out, while everyone laughs at poor little Gary for being mediocre in life and mediocre in death. Just as they like to remind me.
Well, that's not very nice, I said mockingly through my laughter.
Yeah, go on then. Make fun of poor stupid old good-for-nothing Gary, like everyone else.
Oh, gee, sorry, Gary. I'm Adam, by the way, and I'm pretty sure you called me a good-for-nothing cunt. Who should do the world a favor, but I guess we'll just let that slide.
Actually, I think I called you a pathetic bitch, but I told you already, I'm just doing my job.
Gary said, becoming increasingly frustrated. Yeah, well, definitely not well. I think I'd have to agree with Bill and Ted on this one. You may want to put in your 2 weeks' notice. Wait a minute. Are there really 2 demons in hell taking bets on your failure whose names are fucking Bill and Ted? I asked him.
There is.
I immediately burst out laughing again.
It's not funny. They make my life a living hell. Well, even more than it already is. No one ever sees my potential. I'm always the butt of some half-witted joke. You were supposed to be my big win. You were Ted's one big fuck-up, and I was gonna be the one to get you.
What are you talking about?
Remember when you were like 16 and you started doing a titload of drugs because you were all pissed off at life, like a bratty little teenager?
Yeah?
Right, well, that was Ted's influence. He saw you were depressed and in a pretty weakened state emotionally, so he started popping in your dreams to chase you around so you wouldn't get any proper sleep. Anyway, he just figured the insomnia would drive you mad. He didn't even bank on you turning to hard drugs just to get some rest. He was quite proud of that one. Thought he had your soul in the bag, so he got complacent, started working on other cases. And then, by the time he got back to check on your status, you had somehow managed to clean up your act. Fucker actually got demoted from office manager for that one. It was hilarious. So anyway, thought it would be my big moment if I managed to be the one to take you down. For someone so frickin' pitiful, you have a surprisingly resilient soul, unfortunately for me.
Or you're just shit at your job, man.
Well, thanks a lot. Believe me, if I could take another job, I would. This is the best it gets for a demon in hell. It is hell after all.
Sounds more interesting than my job.
I mean, yeah, probably is. So, yeah, I mean, this has been an alright little chat and all, but could you please just get on with it? I would really just like to get back to my nap.
I mean, sorry, dude. It was kinda on a whim, an impulsive decision. I'm not really in the mood to kill myself anymore.
Damn it.
Honestly, I haven't laughed that hard in years. If anything, you prevented my suicide. If the whole demon thing doesn't work out for you, you should really consider a job in counseling.
Oh, you're hilarious. Well, shit. Now what? I can't go back to hell like this. Can't face stupid Bill and Ted. Not to mention, I have a performance review with the big guy at the end of this month. That's gonna be rough.
Gary said somberly. Sorry, Gary. Maybe if you stick around for a bit, I'll eventually change my mind. I'll be sure to give you all the credit when I get to hell. I softened my tone, surprised at the realization that I seemed to actually be hurting this demon's feelings.
Well, thanks, Adam. I do appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, sure thing, buddy. If you want, you can keep berating me for a while. Maybe if I have a constant voice in my ear reminding me I'm a worthless cow, it'll speed up the process.
Yeah, doubtful. Not even an overqualified demon such as myself could talk more shit on you than you already do. You're so mean to yourself. What could I possibly say to top it?
Yeah, fair point.
Let's see. You're ugly, stupid, nobody loves you, and you're kinda short, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, Gary. That's not gonna cut it. Probably should have left me alone. I was already doing a pretty good job of talking myself into an early grave before you came along, so no offense. But considering you really do make a terrible demon, I have to ask, how exactly did you become one? Are demons just born that way? Was it some weird voodoo curse or some shit?
Nice of you to ask, Adam. No one's really ever asked me before how I got into the son of it. It began a long time ago, when I was a boy. I used to be human once too, believe it or not. You certainly wouldn't know by my appearance, but no, we're not born this way. At least, I wasn't.
Can I see what you look like?
It's pretty bad. You're not gonna like it. I'm ugly as sin. Literally.
Oh, go on, Gary. Don't be shy.
Okay, look in the mirror. I should be able to picture you there.
I walked over to the mirror and watched intently as a figure appeared behind me. At first, just a black silhouette. It slowly began to take form. Gary was not exaggerating. I gasped in horror at the sight of it. A hideous, terrifying creature, the embodiment of evil. Its mouth full of broken and jagged teeth, its eyes pitch black and bulging, skin peeling from its face, revealing a gruesome black oozing decay underneath where blood should have been. Holy shit, Gary. You are pretty scary looking, my dude.
I know. It's gross.
No, it's really not that bad.
I was handsome once. Kind of. Oh, whatever. So anyway, I was gonna tell you the story about how I became a demon.
Right, yeah, I'm actually pretty curious about that.
Alright. Well, yeah. So I was a boy, living in a small town in Norfolk. My dad was an asshole. My mum was alright. I had a decent childhood for the most part, except for the ruddy turd of a neighbour I was unfortunate enough to live next to. He was called Tom, and for whatever reason, got quite a laugh out of making my life absolutely miserable.
Why?
No idea, honestly. Never did a single thing wrong to that kid. Guess he was just one of those assholes who got off on picking on people. Always trying to one-up, make himself feel superior. He had quite the complex, that Tom. Anyway, whenever I'd be playing in the yard, trying to mind my business, enjoying myself, Tom would come over and make some sort of challenge out of whatever I was doing, telling me I was shit and that he could do better. He would challenge me to a race, push me to the ground midway through, and still brag in the most obnoxious way about how he won. That sort of push your buttons hard kind of bullshit. I know it was that stupid kid shit, but I was a kid too, and it really started to get into me. I hated him. I really did. I honestly wish I hadn't even allowed him to take up so much space in my head, but that fucker really got under my skin, you know?
Yes, I do know. Some people just seem to think the smaller they make you feel, the bigger and better it makes them, I told him.
Yep, that was Tom, always belittling me as if it somehow made him the better man. It was bad, but I could deal with it. Until Sarah moved into the small farmhouse down the way. Sarah, from the moment I saw her, I loved her. She was beautiful, blonde hair, blue eyes, perfect. And she was kind too, very kind to me. We became friends instantly. We would take long walks together, we would talk and laugh for hours. I loved her more than anything. I was planning on asking her to marry me.
Aw, she sounds cool.
She really was. Until Tom came along. Dug his grubby little hooks into her. He made up a bunch of awful lies about me, tried to scare her off. Said I used to kill old barn cats for sport, that I was cruel to other kids when we were young. Might as well have been describing himself when he talked about me. I don't understand why she believed him. She knew me. But he was a cunning fucker. Wormed his way into her ear, implanting himself in her head. She stopped talking to me. And not after long, they were married.
Oh shit, Gary. That's awful. I'm sorry, man.
The worst part was, he didn't even love her. He didn't care about her at all. He only did it to hurt me. I will never understand that. How someone could be so cruel they would go to such lengths just to hurt someone else. Just to come out on top. He would parade her around, always trying to make me jealous. Rumours started around town about how he would hurt her, how he spoke to her in public. He treated her terribly. But she stayed out at duty for the vow she had made, because that's the type of person she was. Anyway, I tried to block it out. I was saving money to move far away from that awful little town, away from Sarah and away from Tom. I loved to fish, so to make a little extra money, I would go out to the local pond in my little canoe and sit out there in peaceful stillness. Catch a few fish, sell them at the market. It was nice. I enjoyed the solitude. I would drift out onto the pond in my own little world, away from anyone who could disturb me. So, of course, Tom hated that. He hated that I found something that I enjoyed, that I was good at, better than him, and he knew it. So, one day he came to me, with a bet. He offered me more money than I made in a week if I could catch a larger fish than he could. I tried to refuse. I did not want Tom spoiling my happy little world in the pond. But I needed that money, and I knew I would win. I wanted to take his money and use it to make my grand exit, so I accepted.
Oh boy.
Yep. The next day we went out in my canoe. I tried to block him out as he taunted me, and the sound of his voice alone was enough to make my blood boil. "Shut up, Tom," I repeated to him over and over, but more frustrated because the more he prodded, reveling in, knowing he was getting under my skin. But he hadn't caught a single fish. I'd caught about 5 already. I turned the tables and began to laugh, and reminded him that for all his shit talk, it seemed we had found something I could do better. Something he couldn't cheat at to win, like he did when we were kids. I could see he was getting angry, and this fueled a sick sense of pleasure deep inside me. In that moment, I finally understood how Tom felt all the time. That was the only sense of pleasure he knew how to derive from life, and in that brief moment of empathy, I actually pitied him. Glad that I could find peace in my art and joy from something as simple as fishing, while all he felt was rage and a need to hurt other people to make himself feel better. But, like I said, the moment was brief. And then there was a bite, and a sharp tug on my line. I could tell it was a big one. It took me at least 10 minutes to reel it in. It nearly tipped the boat as it tried to swim down to safety of deeper water. But when I finally pulled it up, it was beautiful. A massive fish, larger than I'd ever caught in the pond. I laughed, and of course I rubbed it in Tom's face that it was time to go home. That there was no way he could catch a larger one than that. I carefully removed the hook, getting ready to toss it back in the pond. "Aren't you going to sell it at the market, Gary?" Tom asked. "No way. Sure, I can make some decent money of a fish this size, but this beauty deserves to be free. This big guy's been in this pond a while to get to this size, and no one here has managed to catch him until now. I will let him continue breeding so that there will be more like him in the future for someone else like me to enjoy. Because unlike you, Tom, some of us are able to enjoy things like fishing, like the compassion of a good woman, like the warmth of the sun. Some of us can feel joy without the needing to cheat and steal it from others. Searing pain, blackness. It took me a moment to realise what happened. Tom had punched me square in the nose. Blood was squirting out my face, stained the sides of the boat, and before I could get myself together, I watched helplessly as he bashed the life out of my beautiful catch with an empty half bottle, laughing as he beat the skull out of that poor bastard beyond all recognition. And just like that I snapped. Years of his torment, countless hours of mental energy wasted on my hatred of this sorry fucker, and I finally snapped. I shoved him as hard as I could, and right over the side he went. The boat rocked violently, but somehow managed to stay upright as I watched him flail and panic to keep his head above water. "Help! I can't fucking swim, Gary! Help!" I reached over the side of the boat, grabbed his hand. "Look, another thing I'm better at. Swimming." Couldn't help but point that out and laugh. "Fuck you, you stupid loser!" he shouted at me while sucking in water between breaths. "That stupid bitch Shira, she would have married you, you know. I made her hate you. I told her every lie I could think of, to make sure she chose me over you. And you were too big of a fucking coward to man up and try to win her back. You just laid down to die like the worthless waste of man you are. Even knowing that he would drown and that I was the only one there to save his life, he still couldn't help himself. He still couldn't keep his mouth shut. He still felt the need to berate me while swallowing more and more pond water with every word he spoke. So, I let go. I let go of his hand, and I grabbed my oar and paddled away, his panicked screams, full of rage and hate, slowly fading behind me. I rode away with a smile on my face and never looked back. I had never known what true contentment felt like until Tom was gone. Like a weight lifted off me, I finally truly understood peace. But about a week later, I was trampled to death by a stampede of horses that were accidentally sprung from the corral of the neighbouring farm. Figures, right? Anyway, I woke up in hell with this mess of a face, damned for all of eternity, doomed to live out my biggest sin over and over. To exist in a constant state of rage, taking it out on all those tortured souls, misdirecting my own misery onto them. Damned to be, well, Tom, basically. God definitely has a pretty fucked up sense of humour. Meanwhile, stuck at the office with a whole bunch of other arseholes just like Tom, just like me. Worst part, can't find Tom. It's been like 100 years at least, and I can't fucking find him down there. I swear to God, if that arsehole made it to heaven.
Gary, wow, I am so sorry. That really does not seem fair at all. Maybe he's down in the pit? Maybe you just can't see him. Maybe you'll even be shoveling shit on his face for the next 100 years?
I sure do like to hope so, Adam. That's about all I have left to hope for, if I'm being honest with myself. Most likely, I'll just be damned to an eternal, lubeless ass-fucking after my complete and utter failure with you.
Oh man, I really am sorry. I wish there was something I could do to help, but like you're really not selling the whole hell thing. I kind of rather live out my shitty life at this point in the hopes that maybe I'll end up somewhere else.
That's fair. You've probably tortured yourself enough anyway. Hell would just be redundant for you at this point. A bore, really.
Guess that's true.
But, thanks for listening. It's been nice to have someone to talk to.
Yeah, man, it's been nice talking to you too, Gary. Thanks for helping me not kill myself. But again, sorry about that.
That's alright. Any other questions you want to ask an old demon before I head back down to face the music?
Yeah, actually, if there is a hell, that means there's a heaven, right? What exactly do I need to do to get there? Can you give me like a list of requirements or something?
Well, as far as I know, it works something like this. Really good people, really good. The ones who somehow manage to avoid giving in to shoving people off canoes no matter how much they suck, and who live in the service of others, they go to heaven. Average Joes like yourself who don't really do much of anything, not really, no offence, are reincarnated to try it again. The rest of us end up in hell, in some form or other. I guess depending on what it is that dooms your internal soul to deserve, an eternity of self-loathing in a sea of other helpless creatures selfishly dragging each other under while trying to pull themselves out of the pit. Or a demon stuck listening to creeps like Bill and Ted all day. Shit like that.
Guess my best chance is reincarnation then. Pretty sure I'm not getting into heaven.
Yeah, nah. Yeah, definitely not.
Well, thanks for the vote of confidence.
Sorry. Anyway, I guess I better be getting back. Could you do me a quick favour?
Sure, Gary. What is it?
If a demon named Ted comes around, just don't kill yourself for him, okay? I'll never hear the fucking end of it.
Fair deal, buddy.
Thanks. Oh, and one more thing. If you could just draw a symbol in your blood on the door, it would help me out a lot. It's like a 3-mile, a long jagged-ass mountain if I don't teleport directly into the headquarters. Hell's just really a pain in the ass at every turn.
I picked the knife back up and made a small incision in the flesh on my forearm. With Gary's instruction, I drew the symbol on my front door.
Okay, now you just put your palm to it and repeat this phrase.
Wait a minute. No offense, Gary, but you are a demon. How do I know this wasn't all some elaborate trick to gain my trust and get me to draw this weird symbol thing to open some portal to hell and start the apocalypse or something?
Damn, why didn't I think of that? That would have been a great idea. I really am bad at my job. You know what, Adam? You'd make a pretty damn good demon. Perhaps we'll meet again someday.
Well, thanks, Gary. No offense, but I really hope not.
Okay. Well, bye, I guess.
Later, Gary. I put my hand on the door and listened to the words Gary told me to repeat. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, I was blinded by the most brilliant light I had ever seen. My entire apartment bathed in this light. I could see nothing else. I was forced to shield my eyes. They felt like they would burn right out of my skull. After a few seconds, I opened my eyes slowly, squinting to see the light had dimmed but was still quite profound. And in the center of the pearly gold iridescence was a man. A beautiful man with long brown hair, long white robes, and a pair of seriously old sandals. Holy shit! Jesus Christ! Wait, Jesus?
Well, hi there, friends.
Hi! I stumbled over my words. Are you like Jesus?
The one and only. Well, no, not exactly. Depending on your religion. There's Korean Jesus, Black Jesus, the list goes on. Basically, we're a group of hippies who tried to be nice to people and got totally wrecked for it.
Whoa! That's a lot. Why are you in my living room?
Well, I was just hanging with some friends sharing a peace pipe with some forest critters in heaven, when a little birdie told me that there's a demon on Earth trying to talk you into killing yourself. Not cool, Gary.
Well, wait, Jesus, he didn't. He actually saved my life, ironically enough.
Yeah, that's what the little birdie said. You're pretty shit at your job, Gary.
I'm so sorry. I truly am. Please, Jesus, have mercy. Please, forgive me.
Well, buddy, that's my job, and I happen to actually be very good at it. It's you who needs to forgive yourself. Same goes for you, Adam. You guys realize you've been bigger dicks to yourselves than anyone else ever has, right?
The room was silent. Neither myself nor Gary could find the words. We were awestruck, consumed in the glory that filled the room. We fell to our knees and cried our desperate apologies to the godly figure that stood above us.
Oh, now, take it easy, guys. It's all good. As far as humans and demons go, you guys are pretty alright.
The man knelt down and put a hand on both of our shoulders. A feeling of true peace, of calm warmth washed over me. I sobbed as my entire being was engulfed in a love that forced out all the pain and fear that had shacked me for so long to this miserable state of being. I felt true freedom. I finally understood. Well, everything. I understood the meaning of life, of love, of being. I understood the true value of myself and of everyone else through the eyes of this godly man. This embodiment of truth, of unconditional love for all things, who also happened to be just a truly good dude who smoked peace pipes with chipmunks and wore old sandals. Even the guilt and shame I would have otherwise felt in the face of this purity was gone, replaced with forgiveness. As for the first time, I truly forgave myself. I forgave myself for all the pain and suffering I had caused. Well, myself. And then I woke up to the blaring sound of my alarm. 6 a.m. It was all a dream? No. How? How could all of that been a dream? It was so real. I said my thoughts aloud, almost believing Gary could hear me. I began to sob, angry at my own mind for allowing me to feel such peace if it wasn't real to begin with. But as I got up, I saw the dried blood on my hand and a strange symbol on the door. I looked out my window and saw a little bird come to greet me on the windowsill. It sang its sweet song as if directly to me. I smiled at the little Jesus bird, the first real smile I had felt on my face in a long time. I decided, in that moment, that I would make it real, that I would live the rest of my life in appreciation of all the glory and wondrous joys of this world, knowing that good or bad, all things in life are just experiences to be had, that even in times of sadness, I would rather be sad than be numb. And in times of frustration, I would seek out the things that brought my joy and peace. I vowed to be kind to others and kind to myself. And I kept that promise. I decided to live the fullest life that I possibly could. I met a man and was married. I had 3 children whom I loved unconditionally. I had found a deep happiness inside myself that couldn't be broken even in the face of hard times. For years, I volunteered at the local animal shelter. I had found the true sense of joy that comes from living in service to others. Broken free from the cage of solitude, I spent the start of my life in. I was truly fulfilled. But once in a while, I would think of Gary. I would look into the mirror and say his name, waiting for his ugly-ass face to appear, but he never did. I wondered what became of Gary. If he was shoveling shit, or if perhaps he had been promoted since then. Maybe given some bat wings and the freedom to fly around instead of having to climb jagged mountains over lakes of fire and the like. I hope so. I wished I could thank the demon who saved my life. I was deep in thought about Gary when a call came into the animal shelter. The blind owner of a 10-year-old service dog had passed away, and his family was bringing him in. I knew it was not likely that they would find a new home for an old dog. I tried not to be angry at the family of the man who refused to care for the dog of their lost loved one in its golden years. I chose a pen for him and placed a warm blanket and some toys and treats around the cage, trying to make it as comfortable as possible. I would make sure he felt safe and cared for, loved. The dog was brought in soon after, a beautiful black lab with brilliant, inquisitive eyes. According to the family, he had been a wonderful service dog, incredibly intelligent, a true friend to its owner, and the only reason the man was able to live out his life safe at home instead of in some awful facility. I bit my tongue and kept myself from the, "Well then why don't you have a heart and take him home with you? He's probably even more devastated than you are about the death of its owner," comment that I was dying to make. I just smiled and kept quiet. I took the dog out back, allowing him some time to play in the sun before being put in his pen. He ran around for a moment, releasing excess energy, and then ran right to me. I scratched behind his ears as he looked up at me, with the look of love that dogs are so good for, and what I believe truly looked like a contented smile on his face. It felt like the greeting of an old friend. I wasn't quite sure why, but it felt as if I knew him. I had the strongest sense of déjà vu I had ever experienced. His eyes looked to mine, and I felt as if this old black lab was thinking the same thing. I knelt down to continue petting him and noticed the tag on his collar. His name was Gary. "Don't worry, Gary," I said softly. "All dogs go to heaven."
My first memory of him was when I was 4. I remember laying in bed with my blankets pulled up to my chin, staring at the ceiling. He walked through an unseen door in the corner of my room. He introduced himself.
"Sleep is here."
His voice echoed like a cathedral choir, a low, almost haunting tone, practically soothing if it wasn't coming from a slender and hunched shadow figure. Even though this was the earliest memory, I could feel that I have known sleep my entire life. He took a long stride from the corner of the room to a seated position at the edge of my bed.
"It's time for you to close your eyes. Don't open them, or I will hurt you."
I wasn't scared. Not then. This is how I slept. I waited until dawn. This was how all boys slept. The reason this particular memory of sleep was etched into my brain, though, was the curious reaction from my parents. 4-year-old me felt the sun touch my cheek. I knew then it was safe, that he was gone. I opened my eyes to a new day. I walked down the stairs to my parents already eating breakfast and drinking coffee. They were my superheroes. "Mum, Dad, there's a monster that sleeps with me at night," I shakingly expressed. I could sense the mood immediately shift. Even at that young age, it didn't feel comforting. I've skinned my knees enough time and been scooped up and kissed to know what comforting warmth embrace felt like. My dad stared at me with one eye almost closed, his head cocked as if studying me. Then my mother leaned over and whispered something to my dad. They both got up from the table and went to the other room. I heard hushed whispering. To this day, I wish I knew what they were discussing. The only other memory from that day is going out to get ice cream. I'm always tired. I'm always exhausted. I tried to explain what happens to me at night, and the teachers would call my parents about my imaginary friend. Sleep wasn't imaginary. He was very much real. As I grew older and into my early 20s, I stopped mentioning sleep to teachers. I apologized to teachers and promised to try harder. The school suggested counseling. The counselors would call my parents about my imaginary friend. So I stopped talking about sleep entirely, especially because my parents offered no reaction. At the age of 12, I had my first sleepover. I was the weird kid in school, so I wasn't popular, but on the other side, I didn't seek friendship. This was one of those every boy in class is invited sleepovers. The boy's name was Jimmy. I knew that he didn't want me there. I didn't want to be there either. I kept to myself, talked very little, had my pizza, had my ice cream from those giant Neapolitan tubs. We stayed up late playing hide and seek. I wasn't even aware of the time until Jimmy's mother announced it was bedtime. There was at least a dozen sleeping bags in the living room. I was getting nervous. What if sleep showed up? He was always there. All the boys crawled into their sleeping bags, giggling, laughing, telling ghost stories by flashlight. They asked if I knew of any ghost stories. I shook my head and passed the flashlight to the next boy. I kept to myself. Eventually, one by one, we all fell asleep. Well, except me. I lay with my eyes open, listening to the soft breathing of peaceful sleeping. Sleep never came. I lay awake all night, having the best time of my life. The next morning there was a frantic knocking at the door. Jimmy's mum opened the door and it was my mum. She was crying and shaking. "Get your things. You need to come home. This was a mistake." I quickly gathered everything and we left in a hurry. No explanation, no goodbyes. We got in the black Camry parked on the street. "He killed himself. Your dad. He killed himself. We're gonna stay at Grandma's." She was hysterical. I've never seen anything like this. "This never should have happened." We drove and drove. It seemed like hours. Quick bathroom breaks, snacks, water, then back on the road. We drove more. It was tense, quiet. We never spoke the entire time. How come I never met Grandma? I kept wondering. What happened and why are we going? I was full of questions, but I didn't dare ask them. The time on the clock read 7:14 as we pulled into a driveway of a small house. My mum got out of the car, then went to the trunk. She pulled out several suitcases and dragged them to the front door, leaving me in the car. The door opened and a diminutive woman opened the door. Grandma looked ancient, from what I could remember. Skin sagging, eyes sunken with deep red circles, she made eye contact with me and motioned me to come. I grabbed my belongings and approached. "I have a room for you already set up. Let me show you. My name is Rita. It's good to finally meet Kim's boy. You look so much like your father when he was your age." She was sweet, caring, kind. I had another realization that day. I never felt that from my parents. After many years of therapy, I coined the term business partners. My parents felt like business partners. That sleepover and my first meeting with Rita was my introduction to feeling welcomed, even if it was forced or someone was obliged. I lay in bed that night, the blankets pulled up to my chin how I always do. Out of the corner of my eye, sleep walked in from the corner. He sat on the edge of my bed. I waited for him to speak.
You kept your eyes open last night. Everyone dies. Your father wanted me to give you this.
His tone wasn't malicious. It was matter of fact. Sleep reached his long, thin arm to me with a piece of paper crumpled in his fist. I opened the paper and inside I saw the words, "Now you know." It was my father's handwriting, all right. "What do you want?" I began to yell.
Don't you ever speak to me, or I will hurt you. You will never escape me.
He snarled. I sensed anger in his rising tone. "I'll find a way," I hurriedly shouted at him. No sooner after I finished, he reached out onto my hand with his own and then grabbed my index finger and snapped it. I cried out in pain, but he held his hand against my mouth and put his face to my ear.
Close your eyes. Don't ever open them again.
Tears streamed down my face as I quietly lay in fear. For the first time I felt afraid of him. He never hurt me, never did anything like this. I closed my eyes and waited. I heard a knock on the door. Rita was on the other side.
"Your mother left for your safety, and for her own. I think it's time you understand. Get out of bed and meet me in the living room."
I was so numb. I was overloaded. My curiosity was going to be satisfied. I showered, then got dressed and headed to the living room. Rita was sitting on a black leather couch with what appeared to be a photo album on her lap.
"Listen to me. I will hand this to you. Don't ask me anything. I know you're young. This is now yours. It belonged to your parents. Now they're gone. It falls to you. We will never speak of this. You will never speak of this. No one will ever be hurt again if you keep silent. Don't keep this in your bedroom. Put it back on the shelf when you're done."
She handed me the thick book and walked out. Inside was handwritten notes, letters, pictures, dates. I was just so tired. Black and white pictures of people I've never seen before, names, family curse, sleeping sickness, insomnia, decades, generations, cures. Don't have children. This was too much. I wanted to talk to Rita, but after what happened yesterday, I couldn't. I knew deep down something terrible would happen. Months passed and I learned more about my family. Grandma Rita was full of love and I felt like I belonged for the first time. She insisted on homeschooling me to protect me. I protested at first, but then she pulled out a newspaper from the town I lived in. My old school burned down. Everyone survived except my class. The cause was unknown, but I knew. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't talk about sleep. My 13th birthday came and Rita baked me a carrot cake. There was something odd I couldn't put my finger on. If she was my grandma, why wasn't she in the book? No mention, no pictures. Deep in my heart I knew I couldn't ask. I knew what would happen. My birthday was still fun though, probably one of the more happier times in my life. That night was still the same as every other night.
Sleep is here. Don't open your eyes, or I will hurt you.
I grew older. Rita reached out to the school board, mentioned a medical condition. She was able to convince them that I should go get a high school diploma. I graduated high school. A week after that, Rita sat me down again on that familiar black leather couch. I'm going to die soon. I kept the promise to your parents and now it's my time. Will you be okay without me? I will help you get a job. There is some inheritance, but not much, because, well, I'll help you out as much as I can. Promise me that if you do work, please only work in the mornings. Do you understand? Rita helped me get on my feet. I couldn't go back to my childhood home, but Rita promised I could have the house when she passes. I got my first job at a hotel working reception. I got a car. I started saving money. I was at a strange peace in my life, despite not sleeping, despite having this dark cloud over my head. He called himself sleep, but I could never sleep. Shortly after my 22nd birthday, Rita passed. She left the house, and I was suddenly alone. But I wasn't. I had sleep. I had my family book. I would go over it every month or so, seeing if I missed anything This particular reading, a certain word popped out. Unobservable. It was followed by another phrase, speak not and see not. I wanted to test something. I bought a video recorder from a pawn store several miles away and set it up in my bedroom. I turned it on and pointed it at my bed. That night, nothing. Sleep never came. The next morning I went over the footage. It was just me. No shadowy figure, nothing. I wrote my notes and theories down. Unobservable. See not. See not. I went back to the section where I saw that passage. Sleep only come when one is alone. If he knew he was being watched, or if others were there, he would not show up. Dire consequences would follow if he was observed. A chill ran up my spine, and at that exact moment I heard sirens speeding past. I turned on the local news. A raging fire broke out and burnt several stores down in a city block. In the center lay the wreckage of the pawn store. No survivors. That night, I waited for sleep. I had the camera turned off.
Tricks won't work. You will close your eyes. Death will follow if you test me.
I knew not to talk back, but I had another idea pop into my head. The next night, I hid the video recorder underneath laundry in the basket outside of the room. I moved the basket inside of the room. It was haphazardly pointed at my bed. Sleep came as he always does.
Did you get it out of your system? You cannot escape me. Don't open your eyes, or I will hurt you.
The next morning, I moved the basket out of my room. I dug through the laundry and hit the stop recording. I really didn't want to see the tape. I needed the right moment. I went to a nearby therapist office and passed the receptionist a note about how I'm non-verbal and needed counseling over trauma. Over the coming months, I began building my case surreptitiously, note by note, session by session, weekly. I started with my sleep problems, my insomnia, bullying in school, my dad's suicide, my mum abandoning me at the woman's house that wasn't even related to me. I was slowly giving Mrs. Brown the puzzle pieces. After 6 months, I entered her office with a large bag containing the tape and my family history. Are you ready? Yes, to begin the session? I think you are really opening up and doing so much better. she responded cheerily. What I'm going to tell you, you can't speak it out loud. Promise me this. Okay, I promise. We will only communicate in notes. Please remain silent. I didn't want to scare her. I began writing my essay, everything I knew. Yeah, it was crazy. It was weird. This needed to end. Someone has to help me. I have no one. I pushed several pieces of paper over to her. I took out the tape, and I took out the book, and I pushed those to her as well. Mrs. Brown was going over everything with a furrowed brow, studying intently. After a long 15 minutes, she was finished. That, she started. I leaped out of my chair and immediately put my hand over her mouth. You promised! I shouted at her. You can talk? She exclaimed after I moved my hand. That's not important. You promised. Don't say anything about this. Take the tape home. I will see you next week. I grabbed my book and ran out of the office. I think I just caused somebody's death. Hopefully, she understands. That night was the same as always. Don't open your eyes, or I will hurt you. The next morning at 8 o'clock my phone rang. Probably a telemarketer. Is this Rick? Hey, this is Deborah. Mrs. Brown? We need to talk. She hung up the phone. She believed me. That evening I was feeling vindicated, powerful in a way that I haven't ever felt. I wrote down my thoughts, a brief layout of the experiment I wanted to conduct. I'm going to wait until I see Mrs. Brown next Wednesday. Speak not. Those two words felt like they had meaning. I got ready for bed, as I always do. This time I wrote a note and crumpled it up in my fist. When I got into bed, I pulled the blankets up to my chin. The blinds were open and the street illuminated by moonlight. I did what he told me to do 10 years ago. I opened my fist and reached out to him. A gift for me? He seemed surprised. I felt his long fingers wrap around the note, then heard him unfold it.
Why me? There is no me. Don't flatter yourself.
The words drifted lazily into my ears. He must have seen my forehead wrinkle in confusion.
The arrangements from yesterday wears heavy on the child of tomorrow. Do you want a gift? Nod.
I'm even more confused. How come no one in the family tried this? Have they? What is happening? I'm not sure
What's going on? Last time I spoke more than 5 words, sleep snapped my finger in half. The fear is coming back. A lump formed in my throat. I swallowed hard and nodded meekly.
Close your eyes, or this will hurt more.
I felt a shift in the bed as he leaned over. Suddenly I felt a cold, damp palm on my head. I gasped out loud. 5 fingers wrapped around my skull. Slowly I feel the tips of his fingers sharpen into needles. They dug into my head and then nothing. I opened my eyes and I was in the middle of the woods. From my vantage point, I was off the ground at least 10 feet. My eyes pointed straight ahead. I had no ability to move. In my field of vision, I saw a naked man slowly entering it. He looked familiar. The man has long black hair to his shoulders with red streaks of what looked like paint running horizontally across his face and chest. He had a leather pouch on a belt tied around his waist. I couldn't figure out where I've seen him before. He undid his belt and set it aside. Then he began gathering twigs, branches, and dry brush. After a neat pile, he stood up again and walked away out of my field of vision. He came back again with rocks roughly the same size, then started arranging them in a circle. Where have I seen him before? All the wood and brush he acquired went into the makeshift pit. He squatted down and started a fire. Once the fire was roaring, he pulled out a kettle. He sat the kettle next to him and pulled out some plant material out of his bag. He put the plant material in the kettle, then suspended it over the fire using a handcrafted pot hook and stand. Every couple of minutes he would give it a stir using a wooden spoon. Once it looked ready, he pulled out a cup and poured the tea in. He blew on it to cool it down. After it cooled down, he drank it. If this was a dream, it was very vivid. The sun was beginning to set. I was still stuck, still unable to move. It felt like an eternity. The man was sitting cross-legged by the fire with his eyes closed. Time felt like it was being pulled and stretched at the seams. Seconds felt like minutes, minutes felt like hours. Suddenly the man's eyes flicked open, as wide as they could go. His pupils were dilated. Beads of sweat began forming on his brow. He started making a low, droning